Last section and last operating system you're expected to have some awareness of is Android, and probably you already do have some awareness, but let's go through the steps so we make sure you have seen what happens when you configure Android. Let me be clear, I'll show you at the end of this video. I'm running here Android 4.4.4. There is no specific version that you need to know for the exam, but be careful, each Android version has some variations in the way you can configure Wi-Fi and the number of options you have, and also each vendor has different options depending on what phone you buy, what kind of class the phone is, enterprise or personal, and of course what kind of variations of the operating system they have to enhance the phone capabilities. So this is a Samsung and this is Android 4.4.4. So there may be some options here that would appear differently in your phone if it's an Android, but as long as you have the general principle, that's all that matters. You don't need to have the exact awareness of where everything is, because that again changes from one phone to the other. So on this one and on most Android, there is a Wi-Fi icon at the top that you can click, and if you slide down you can enable or disable Wi-Fi. But then if you go to settings, there should be somewhere a Wi-Fi option. On my case it's at the top because I use it all the time, and here that's the scanning page where you see all the SSIDs available around. Again, at the top you can slide left and right to disable Wi-Fi, and there are the three dots on the right. I'll go to there in a few minutes. But before going there, let me try to connect to this web SSID. So signal is very strong, there is no security, and if I say show advanced options, it asks me if I want to do something special about IP, which is nice if I want to set a static IP address, and that's the difference with the previous ones. I can define the IP settings for that connection, not necessarily for the entire phone. But that network is going to use DHCP, so I don't care. Let me just go connect and try to get an IP address. I get an IP address, and because it's a web type of SSID, just like on Apple, it's going to detect there is a web browsing requirement, and it's going to automatically open a web page to allow me to enter the credentials, if any, just like we had on the other operating systems. And just like on the other, it says, whoa, that certificate is not right. So on Apple, it just says, oh, do you want to take that certificate or not? On here, it says, that's not normal. You shouldn't have that kind of certificate. Are you sure you want to move on? We know what's going on, so we're going to move on and accept that certificate. And of course, we have the same accept page as we had on the other operating systems. It's very tiny, right, because it's a phone, but I could zoom in, but it doesn't matter, what that page is. All right, click OK, and just like on the others, I go through and it opens automatically a web page, and by default, because it's Android, it's going to be Google. Let me go back to my Wi-Fi page. Settings and Wi-Fi. And let's connect to another network, for example, one which is secure. Also, as we go here, did you see there's this option? You don't have that on all the phones. There's this smart network switch, which is not checked in my case. That's a way for the phone to dynamically choose the connection that has the best potential. So based on the RSSI and SNR for the 2.4 and 5 GHz band, and also based on the signal throughput potential between cellular and Wi-Fi, it's going to be able to switch automatically between one network and the other. Nice, of course, especially if you have Wi-Fi only, but if you have Wi-Fi and cellular, it's going to switch to cellular if the cellular connection is better, which may have an impact, of course, on your plan if you have data. So that option is typically on the enterprise type of phones, and it's typically disabled by default because of the possible impact on your costs. All right, so that's nice to mention because it's sort of a auto band select type of feature from the client side. So it's a good feature, at least on the Wi-Fi side. Okay, and if I click here, you see I have a few options. One is to scan, that is to say to refresh the list of channels. Typically Windows and Androids and Apple devices scan that page, refresh that page where you see all the SSIDs on a very short cycle, which is typically between 10 and 12 seconds. Every 10 and 12 seconds, the tool is going to rescan all the channels to refresh the list of SSIDs. Except, of course, in the DFS bands, where we may have the risk of radar detection. So in those, the refresh cycle is a bit longer, but on the other, it's pretty fast. But if you think it's not fast enough, you can always go scan. And if I scan, you just force the refresh, and that's because you don't want to wait these 10 seconds or because you know a change was just made. The other interesting option is Wi-Fi direct connection. That isn't something we had automatically on the others. On Apple iOS, it's there, but it appears whenever Wi-Fi direct is available. And in the other menus, you have some options to use Wi-Fi direct, but it's not an option directly to the Wi-Fi detection page, whereas here, it's apparent in this option. And when you do so, of course, it's going to be a sort of peer-to-peer, and it's going to send discovery messages around in a peer-to-peer fashion. And if there is any peer-to-peer device around that supports Wi-Fi Direct, which, as you remember, is not just ad hoc, it also has WPA2 security and a lot more items that you need to configure to make it more secure and decide who is the center of the group, who is sharing what, etc. So if any device is supporting Wi-Fi Direct around, it's going to appear in the list. And here I have a Roku device, and if I want to connect to it or try to connect to it, I can tap to connect to it. That would need to input some credentials somehow, so I'm not going to do this. So let's go stop and go back to that menu. If I click here, I will probably need to input a password that I don't have anyway. In the Wi-Fi Direct protocol, you have one-to-one connections, and you also have what we call the group connections, where that's what they call here multi-connect, when one device can connect to many devices and act as a sort of man in the middle to connect all these devices together. So that's not the default option, but you can enable this multi-connect option if you want to. And of course, if you don't want to appear with your name, you can rename your device and show as another name. All right, let me go back from Wi-Fi Direct and go back to this menu and go to the advanced option. You see the options we have below: WPS, push button, pin entry. What this is still Wi-Fi Direct, where when you want to set this one-on-one communication, you can use a pin where you ask the other person to enter the pin that appears on your screen on their screen, and that's a way to sort of create a temporary password for your peer-to-peer connection. That could be a pin you enter, or that could be a push button that gives a sort of very short window of opportunity to that device to connect to you. That's something you can also trigger to avoid to have to enter something on the phone. All right, so that's option for Wi-Fi Direct. We are not going to go there. There's also this option which is not Wi-Fi Direct, which is Share Wi-Fi Profile, which is again the way for you to connect to a device and share your connectivity with that device. If you do so, you have to pick up which profile you want to share, and that's again allowing somebody to use that profile to connect through you for connectivity using that profile. And you can decide how long you want people to connect through you with that profile for. And if you do so, then it's going to try to detect devices around that try to connect to you. And of course, that's still Wi-Fi Direct connection, right? And it's going to allow that device to Wi-Fi Direct to you and use through Wi-Fi Direct your Wi-Fi connection to the real network, to the infrastructure network, and of course the internet. Okay, let's not do that. That's typically not a very good idea, not very secure. And also that's not something which is very welcome in enterprise networks, because your Wi-Fi Direct connection is basically going to consume a channel that the enterprise network is also needing. So Wi-Fi Direct is typically not a very good idea in enterprise networks for many reasons, and RF management is one of them. So let me go back to my menu and go to the Advanced tab. If I go here, I have some other options which are not Wi-Fi Direct this time. They are about management of Wi-Fi. One of them is notification. When you detect new networks, it's going to tell you that. Passpoint, that's 802.11u. If you do not remember what that is, go back to this module 1 where we talk about it. That's the option that allows you to discover what is behind the access points if you have a service provider that allows it, and also automatically connect to the access point via a secure manner if, again, you have a profile from a service provider that allows you to connect through the AP and to the service provider. It is disabled by default because, again, this is not a feature that is widely deployed yet. You may have only a few places here and there that support Passpoint, so it's not something that would be so common that you would need to have it on all the time. But if you know of a network that is Passpoint enabled, it is often called Hotspot 2.0 as well, then you can check that box, and of course you will need to put a profile on your phone depending on which service provider you're working with, so that you can connect automatically using a profile in your phone. Then a few other options at the bottom: keep Wi-Fi on during sleep, so you can connect directly even if the phone is sleeping. That consumes more battery, but of course it's faster for your connection, and then you can get some push information as your phone is sleeping. And always allow scanning. It means that you're going to scan all the time a network, even if Wi-Fi is off. And that is useful for you, and also it's being sent to Google so they can map where you are and what Wi-Fi is available around you. At the bottom, your MAC address and also your IP address, IPv4 and IPv6. If you want to create a new profile that doesn't exist in the list of all the profiles you have, you go all the way at the bottom and you click Add Wi-Fi Network. And then logic of the tool is the same as on all the others. You enter the SSID name, and then you type whatever security you want to have for this profile, And you still have these two advanced options for the IP because, again, on this version of Android, you can have one IP system or one IP addressing scheme per profile. It's not for the entire device, it's just per profile. All right, nothing special here. Just see the usual web LoPA, LoPAv2, .1x heap. If you say LoPA, LoPAv2 here, notice they also have 11R. So that Android device, and again, it depends on which device you have, does support fast roaming. So that's nice to have. If you have an enterprise type of device, it commonly has that. So let me not do it. And this is pretty much the extent of what you need to know on Android. You know, it's pretty similar to the other, but with a small variations that you want to be aware of. So that is again on Android 4.4.4. Depending on what Android version you're running, you may have some variations in your tool. And also depending on what bloatware you have on top of pure Android on your device, you may have a different type of interface with slightly different options, more or less, or set differently. Doesn't matter. For the exam, you just need to have this global awareness of what options are there and how it works and how you would compare it slightly to the other devices.